Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari Chen and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of Remnants of Filth, Volume 3, also known as Yubu by Rou Bao or just Meatbun, and we're covering chapters 86 through 90. I hope you all enjoy. Yeah, let's get back into the suffering and the time mirror, shall we? Chapter 86, Fall from Grace. The slap landed with an audible crack, with Morsi's full strength behind it. Loo John-shing's cheeks swelled almost instantly, and blood ran from the corner of his mouth. Morsi stared at him viciously, the rims of his eyes a bloody red. His voice shook with every syllable.
What right do you have to decide for him? What right do you have to choose for him? Do you know what desperate straits he'll be in after your death? After the deaths of his 70,000 comrades who can never return? Are you trying to push him into the abyss, Loo John-shing?
Fire blazed in his eyes.
You wanted to preserve his life,
he howled.
But have you ever really understood his heart?
Loo John-shing's voice rose as well, his blood-stained lips parting.
His heart soars too high. Sooner or later, it'll have him strung up. What do you know?
Their exchange was like the clashing of two swords, or a battle between beasts.
You were born to a life of luxury. Your so-called troubles were nothing more than some family drama. What have you experienced of the hopelessness that comes from your life hanging by a thread at another's whim? Do you know how hard it's been for Goo Mahng to make it this far?
Loo John-shing seemed to choke with anger and despair.
He's just a stupid donkey. You people took the slave collar off his neck and dangled rank and fortune as carrots in front of him. But did anything change? He's still shedding blood and sweat, pulling the grindstone for you. But somehow he's stupidly delighted about it.
At this point, Loo John-shing helplessly tilted his head back and covered his eyes with an arm as he rasped.
But a donkey is still a donkey. One day, when he gets lazy or tired, when he can't walk anymore, he'll still be consigned to the slaughterhouse.
He let out a long sigh.
What he can't see, I'll help him understand. What he understands but can't let go of, I'll force him to give up. He thought he owed the old emperor a debt, so I waited. I waited for the new emperor to ascend before making my move, so that he wouldn't be scorning the old emperor's favor. What haven't I thoroughly considered for his sake? Loo John-shing.
The emotion Morsi was suppressing in his throat surged like lava.
You're insane. I'm not insane. He is.
Loo John-shing lowered his arm. His eyes were faintly red, but the softness in them had been completely cast away, leaving only a ruthless hatred. He stared at Morsi.
How crazy does Mungar have to be to believe he can single-handedly change the opinion of all the people of Chonghua and the 9 provinces when it comes to slaves? How crazy does he have to be? How insane to think there's hope for any of this? You'd rather he lose the fire in his heart so he can live the life you chose for him?
Morsi asked hoarsely.
What's so bad about living in poverty, away from the whims of the court? A person is no more than a drop of water in the sea, yet he believes that a mayfly can shake the skies. Look, now he understands how this will end. All it takes is the emperor opening his mouth for his castle in the sky to crumble to nothing. For the price of 70,000 lives, neither Goo Mahng nor those poor, stupid slave cultivators will ever again sacrifice their lives for Chonghua.
Loo John-shing's lips twisted in a smile.
Whoever rules the nation shall guard the nation. Please, noble Gongzi Shee Jun, please stop meddling. Just let his laughable army fall apart. We'd rather a graceless life than an honorable death.
We? Ever since his academy days, Goo Mahng had said, his voice filled with longing, that he wished for a day when the world would change, that he wished he himself could change the ways of the world, even if just the slightest bit. As long as he could ignite a single sunbeam, he was willing to burn himself up in exchange, skin and bone. And here was Loo John-shing saying that we would rather a graceless life than an honorable death. What right did he have? Morsi felt a flare of staggering rage, but this conflict with Loo John-shing had already intensified to the point that a momentary slip would result in bloodshed. He didn't want to throw the events within the time mirror into chaos, so he forced himself to close his eyes. Only after some seconds did his overwhelming anger recede. Morsi slowly opened his eyes, black pupils fixing upon Loo John-shing once more. He wanted to have a proper conversation with the man, but Loo John-shing struck out at him yet again.
Shihajun, leave him alone. I won't be able to keep him company in the future. Please, sir, have some mercy. Don't give him any more fatal hope.
Morsi realized he couldn't look at Loo John-shing another second. Even one glance would fan the embers of rage he had just suppressed. He jerked away to stare at the swaying candle flame beside him.
Stop leading him down that road,
Loo John-shing continued. Fingers curling silently into fists, Morsi's gaze wandered from the candle to the 2 dice Loo John-shing had been playing with. He wasn't really interested in the dice. In his pain and anger, he just wanted to find something to focus on, somewhere to rest his gaze. He stared at those 2 white dice with red lacquer for a long time. Presently, he sensed that something wasn't quite right. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled as he was hit with a sudden realization. Morsi's spine stiffened. These dice were white with red lacquer, carved from rosewood, with an unremarkable little lotus motif in place of the 6th dot. Could they be Goo Mahng's wooden dice? Indeed, back in the army, Goo Mahng had liked playing Yetsa cards and dice gambling. He'd envied the insignia of the Mo, Yue, and Muzhong clans, so he cleverly and sneakily invented one for himself. What he came up with was a Buddha's lotus. He didn't want to be mocked, so he only carved it on this set of dice he tossed with his brothers. It would be too vainglorious to put it anywhere else. Back then, Loo John-shing had teased.
You're a grown man. Why are you using a little red lotus as a symbol? A lotus blooms for 7 days,
Goo Mahng explained with a grin.
Even though it's not long, its gentle fragrance can fill the skies. What's wrong with that?
Later yet, when Goo Mahng and Morsi secretly set their blood seals and marked their necks with a sigil, they used the symbol Goo Mahng had chosen. As Morsi realized all this, Loo John-shing's voice sounded as if it were coming from an ocean away. Morsi paid no heed to what he was saying. His fingers were shaking, itching to grab the dice and examine them thoroughly.
Shihajun.
Morsi ignored him.
Let Mangar go,
Loo John-shing continued.
If you really care for him and see him as a person, stop stringing him along, forcing him to slaughter and sacrifice for your sakes. Let him go.
Swallowing thickly, Morsi managed to rein in his impulse. After some silence, he turned away from the dice, face pale. Looking back at Loo John-shing, he murmured.
With this plan you've made for him, are you so certain he'll walk the path you've arranged, living the rest of his life free as a wild crane? What other path is open to him?
Morsi stared dark-eyed into Loo John-shing's face.
Have you never thought he might defect?
Loo John-shing looked at him in confusion. He seemed to find the idea almost laughable.
What nonsense are you talking? Mangar, defect. Do you not know what kind of person he is? Then surely you know how important you and those 100,000 cultivators are in his heart.
Loo John-shing's face went pale. After a momentary silence, he looked up in clear disbelief.
There's no way,
he said stiffly. Morsi assessed every inch of his face, taking in Loo John-shing's reaction.
I know him,
Loo John-shing said.
It doesn't matter what state he's in. He would never do that. He... Is that so?
Morsi asked.
You've never heard of him acting strangely in the 6 months you've been in prison?
Loo John-shing took a step back, a strange panic visible in his eyes. Just as expected, Loo John-shing seemed to know something he didn't. This man was hiding a secret. Into the strained silence, Morsi said carelessly, without preamble.
Loo John-shing, you've seen Goo Mahng since entering prison, haven't you?
Loo John-shing jerked as if struck by a hidden arrow. His head snapped up and his face drained of color. He quickly turned away. After a long beat, he asked,
What is Shihajun thinking? Mungar is a criminal now. How could he come visit me? Of course I want to see him again and talk about old times, but...
He chuckled, smiling as if to mock himself.
Better to dream it instead. It would feel more real than a dream.
Morsi said nothing more. He'd gotten his answer in Loo John-shing's reaction. His eyes darkened. He was almost certain that Goo Mahng had met with Loo John-shing in the past 6 months. But this made the whole thing even more bizarre. How could Goo Mahng, a demoted official monitored by His Imperial Majesty's spies, manage to get past all the guards in the Imperial prison and enter Loo John-shing's cell?
I'm going to ask you one last time,
Morsi said.
Loo John-shing, Goo Mahng really hasn't come to see you?
A pause.
He hasn't. And you haven't endured the slightest injustice. I haven't.
Morsi knew he wouldn't get a reasonable answer however he asked. In the end, they failed to have a meaningful conversation. Neither would convince the other, nor cede to him. Morsi strode out of the dim and cold inner cell of the prison. The door clanged shut behind him, enchanted iron chains sealing Loo John-shing's cell once more. Before Morsi left for good, he turned to take a final look at Loo John-shing. The man sat in the murky halo of the oil lamp, his head bowed and eyes closed. As Morsi turned to go, Loo John-shing looked up once more.
Wait a minute.
Morsi pursed his thin lips and gazed sidelong at him.
What is it?
Loo John-shing gritted his teeth.
One more thing. Since you're here, I also have a question for you. Go ahead.
Loo John-shing hesitated. This question had been bottled up in his heart for a terribly long time, so long it had practically rotted there. If he didn't ask it now, he would never get another chance. Finally, clenching his jaw, he said,
It's been so many years. I've always wanted to know. You and...
Morsi could guess from Loo John-shing's expression and tone what this was about. He stood motionless, calmly waiting for him to continue.
You and him. You and Mungar. Are you two...
What he wanted to ask was too unspeakable, and it involved his childhood friend no less. No matter how brazen Loo John-shing was, he couldn't help but stammer.
Are you two... Yes,
Morsi said. The confirmation from Morsi's own mouth seemed to deal a blow to Loo John-shing. None of their prior exchange had made him as dizzy as that single yes from Morsi. He and Goo Mahng had served together for many years. In truth, Loo John-shing had clued in to certain things long ago. It was just that, out of respect for Goo Mahng, he was too embarrassed to ask about it outright. But just because he'd never asked didn't mean he was stupid or blind. He'd seen how Morsi and Goo Mahng looked at each other too many times. If it had been once or twice, he could have blamed it on his own overactive imagination. But with the frequency of these gazes, he could never convince himself there was nothing between them. He had too often seen Morsi wait for Goo Mahng to patrol together, and when the two of them returned, the outer corners of Goo Mahng's eyes would frequently be a little red, his voice slightly husky. Once, by the light of the bonfire, he had even seen the telltale mark of a bite on Goo Mahng's neck. But conjecture was conjecture. Loo John-shing still felt a little short of breath to hear Morsi directly admit as much in front of him. He took a few steps back and sat heavily on the stone bed.
Mungar is insane. He was doing just fine. Why did he have to get mixed up with you?
He sounded exhausted. Loo John-shing slumped over, burying his face in his hands and rubbing his cheeks.
Doesn't he know his own station?
He rasped.
Why? Why does he always insist on striving for the most unattainable? What a lunatic. He was crazy for real.
He paused, bone-tired.
What point is there in chasing self-destruction like a moth flying into a flame? Why is it that all his life's desires, whether goals or people, are all so...
He swallowed, the final syllables falling from between his lips.
Absurd.
In the flickering light, Morsi looked at him. At last, he said,
"Don't blame him. Between the two of us, it wasn't that he was striving for me. I'm the one who was seeking my own destruction. It was I who clung to him."
With that, he turned on his heel, black robes billowing as he strode up the stairs and disappeared into the corridor's darkness. Night had fallen hours ago. Morsi returned to Shiha Manor, but he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Finally, he snapped upright in bed, draped a robe over his shoulders, and opened the door. The sky was clear as water, stars like loose diamonds filling the dark blue dome of night. He shrouded himself within a hooded cape and went straight back to Apricot Mansion. It would be unwise for him to again show his face to Goo Mahng if he hoped to uncover more buried secrets. Still, he couldn't stop himself from yearning for a few more glimpses of Goo Mahng from 8 years ago. Chapter 87. Mysterious Visitor. The hour was late. The chatter of women and plucking of strings rose and fell without cease within Apricot Mansion. Morsi headed straight for the balcony where Goo Mahng resided. He wasn't worried about being seen by others. Zhanxing's paternal grandfather had made the cloak Morsi wore using feathers of the traceless bird. Though these feathers were known to lose their effectiveness when plucked from the bird's body, the late Yue patriarch was a grandmaster artificer who had successfully preserved some properties of the plumes. This cloak could render its wearer invisible thrice. Morsi jumped down from the eaves of the roof and landed soundlessly upon the balcony flourishing with flowers. The 8-grid tortoiseshell and bamboo door was open wide. Goo Mahng hadn't called Miss Fei Tian the Peepa player back. He was alone in the room. Goo Mahng sat at the table with his eyes closed, elbow propped on the table and cheek pressed in one hand. He looked as if he were asleep, yet also seemed keenly alert, his long lashes fluttering with every exhale. Smoke rose in spirals from the incense burner at his side, blurring and gentling his features. Morsi looked at him, inch by inch, from the tails of his eyes to the tips of his brow to his lips and chin. The candlelight glow was like orange butterflies alight on the tip of his nose. Wrapped in the invisibility cloak, Morsi approached him with his breath held and attention rapt, staring down at his too familiar face. He suddenly understood how Muzhong Lian could depend on ephemera so deeply despite knowing it was a poison that he shouldn't touch, knowing it could dissolve one's willpower and erode one's strength, yet still choosing pleasure over life. His addiction to Goo Mahng had sunk into his bone and marrow, deep as intoxicating smoke. There came a knock at the door. Morsi and Goo Mahng snapped out of their trance at nearly the same time. Morsi took a step back. Goo Mahng stood to open the door. Morsi thought it would be another little Peepa playing minx, but when the door opened and Goo Mahng turned to let the newcomer in, Morsi found it was no songstress at all, but rather a figure in a black cloak much like his own. This person wasn't using an invisibility cloak, but they had hidden their face completely behind a gold and silver mask. The only detail to be gleaned from their tall and upright figure was that this individual was likely male.
Who?
Morsi had scarcely finished the thought when the cloaked man spoke. His voice was obviously distorted by a voice-changing spell. It came out as an uncanny rasp.
"Did anything strange happen today?"
the man asked. Goo Mahng was silent for a moment, then answered.
"No." "Is that so?"
the cloaked man replied thoughtfully.
"No one came to visit?"
"No," Goo Mahng said again. At his insistence, the masked man dropped the matter. He placed a bundle wrapped in cloth on the table.
"I brought this for you. You should change into it."
Goo Mahng turned down a corner of the bundle, but then quickly folded it back up.
"What do you mean by this?" "If you're going to go there, you'd best prepare, hadn't you?"
Goo Mahng's fingertips hovered over the package. At these words, he tensed, his fingers curling around the cloth. This only left Morsi more perplexed. Goo Mahng had always been the picture of steady composure. If the sky should fall on him, he would probably use it as a blanket, Yet the cloaked man had made Goo Mahng blanch with just this handful of words.
If I tell you what's there, I doubt you'll believe it,
the cloaked man said.
Tonight, I'll take you there in person so you can see the truth with your own eyes.
However warm and soft the candlelight, it brought no color to Goo Mahng's pale face. He seemed to suppress some complicated emotion until even his lips were bloodless. He lowered his lashes, his shoulders trembling. In the end, he took the cloth bundle and disappeared behind the screen. When Goo Mahng stepped out, he was wearing clothes indistinguishable from those of the cloaked man. A dark cape embroidered in pale gold with a swirling cloud and thunder pattern obscured his form completely.
Let's go.
The two departed at the boudoir of lingering fragrance one after another. Morsi followed in their wake. This brothel played host to all sorts. The madam and maidens working here all had 3 don'ts engraved into their hearts. Don't look, don't ask, don't listen. When 2 conspicuously dressed men walked through the corridors of the brothel, the servant girls didn't show the slightest hint of surprise. They merely lowered their heads and made obeisance and kept their heads down until the men were gone. Goo Mahng and that black-garbed man didn't speak as they walked. The two kept the distance of strangers. The black-garbed man walked in front, with Goo Mahng wholly silent as he followed behind. If the black-garbed man had any martial abilities, they weren't obvious, and he kept his aura well concealed. Morsi couldn't probe his spiritual energy flow any further without exposing his own position. He could only tail them to see where they were going. When they had walked for the time it took to burn an incense stick, their direction became clear, and the doubts in Morsi's heart deepened. This was the way to the Warrior Soul Mountain? As he expected, they eventually stopped at the foot of Warrior Soul Mountain. There were no guards at the entrance 8 years ago. Nevertheless, the graves of generations of Chonghwa's heroic dead stood at the summit of the mountain. There was still a formless barrier at the gate to denote respect and reverence. This barrier could disperse almost every disguise or invisibility spell. Morsi could track them no farther. Goo Mahng lowered the hood of his cloak and gazed at the winding stone path. Pines and bamboo swayed on either side, and bright moonlight shone through the tips of their branches to scatter over the ancient limestone steps.
What is it?
Asked the black-garbed man.
Just thinking about how I'll be leaving soon, and my hands will be stained with the blood of Chonghwa's soldiers.
He said no more, but Morsi's heart clenched. Sure enough, Goo Mahng had been lying when they talked. He had already decided to defect. He was already certain that in the future, his hands would be stained with the blood of his former comrades.
Goo Mahng, why did you do it? Who is this mysterious black-clothed man at your side?
Morsi's eyes burned red with the desire to snatch away the man's mask. He squashed the impulse down. Morsi had a feeling that, were he to remove this mask, many questions might be answered, and many mysteries explained. But the trail would end there. He wouldn't be able to discover more. What he learned would not make up for what he would lose. Swallowing thickly, Morsi endured the rushing impatience in his heart. He heard the black-garbed man speak.
Chonghwa's current state is as you've seen. You experienced it yourself after Phoenix Cry Mountain. When you and your army fell from grace, all you found were those who would kick you when you were down. None who would offer help in your hour of need.
The black-garbed man noticed Goo Mahng about to protest and waved a hand.
You don't need to tell me that if Shizun were here, he would side with you. His support is useless. You're a clever person. You understand that Chonghwa has always been ruled by the nobles. You cannot change anything with your power alone.
Morsi's ears seemed to ring. This person was clearly encouraging Goo Mahng to defect. He was describing Chonghwa's current attitudes, telling Goo Mahng, other than Shizun, no one would support you. Was this man from the Liao kingdom? No, that was impossible. How could anyone from Liao move so easily through Chonghua to enter this deserted place? How could anyone from Liao so openly stand in front of Goo Mahng without stirring up his intense disgust and reproach? Unless Goo Mahng trusted this black-garbed man more than the nation of Chonghua. But how could such trust be built in a couple of months, with just a couple of words? Had Goo Mahng already had dealings with some Liao Kingdom spies since long ago? How could this be?
It comes to this,
the man said.
The pieces are already in place for your treason. This move cannot be taken back.
Mo Xi's throat seemed to be filled with cloying blood. On this one short day, 8 years ago, on the eve of Goo Mangh's defection, so much had happened that was buried by the sands of time. His Imperial Majesty's cold ruthlessness, Loo John-shing's stubborn devotion to his aim, Goo Mangh's many worries, as well as this black-garbed man undisguisedly pushing Goo Mahng onto the path to hell. Goo Mahng heard every word the man said, but he showed no reaction. The night wind blew harder, buffeting Goo Mangh's wide sleeves like fallen flowers in the grip of a sudden gust. The cold evening seemed to chill him, his fingers curling as if he wanted to tuck them into his cuffs. The black-garbed man reached out from beneath his dark sleeves and wrapped one fine, boned hand around Goo Mangh's. Mo Xi wasn't the only one stunned by this movement. Goo Mangh's head whipped around, dark eyes wide in shock. He wanted to pull away, yet didn't move.
General Goo,
the black-garbed man said gravely,
none who seek to blaze a new path have hands unsullied by blood.
As he spoke, he lowered his lashes to carefully examine Goo Mangh's fingers and palm.
You know what the nobles of Chonghua are like. As I said, you're a clever person. I don't need to say much. Go up the mountain and take a look.
The black-garbed man paused.
It is my hope that after you've seen it, you'll understand what can and cannot be believed, and what is and is not worth the price.
Goo Mahng closed his eyes. His cloak snapped in the night wind as it whipped past. In the quiet night, Mo Xi wished so deeply that Goo Mahng would flatly refuse, that he would push the black-garbed man away and say, I don't want to defect. Even, let me think about it, would be enough. But Goo Mahng said nothing. In this heartbreaking, bone-shattering silence, Mo Xi's heart chilled.
I understand,
Goo Mahng said.
Let's go.
With that, he strode through the barrier on Warrior Soul Mountain, his black robes billowing like clouds of ink as he ascended the mountain without looking back. Mo Xi didn't know how long the pair spent on Warrior Soul Mountain. He was numb all over. A single day in the time mirror had opened a box stuffed with 8 years of secrets. They came tumbling down on him like an avalanche. This man, who had always stood so tall and upright as if he could bear any burden, found himself leaning against the stone wall just to keep on his feet. Though he managed to stand, his vision flashed dark. These events of the past tore at his tendons, ground his bones into dust. In the end, Mo Xi slid slowly to the ground, doubling over beside the limestone mountain path. He raised a trembling hand to cover his face. The sheer number of threads he was trying to follow had him tangled in a mess. How cold-blooded and detached would he have to be to maintain his composure after suffering such a shock? As dawn began to peek through the clouds, Goo Mahng and that black-garbed man descended the mountain. Just as before, the man walked in front, with Goo Mahng trailing behind. An exhausted Mo Xi looked up through eyes spider-webbed with blood vessels. He faced the faint light of dawn as he watched the two draw near, then pass back through the barrier. Mo Xi's mind had been thrown into disarray. He felt utterly destroyed. At that moment, even this darling of the heavens wouldn't have been able to recite anything from the book Legends of Divine Catastrophe he'd memorized in childhood. Despite it all, in the hazy mist of morning, he could tell from a single glance that Goo Mahng had been crying. Goo Mahng was an indomitable man, but a strong spirit wasn't necessarily contained in a strong body. Goo Mangh's body was warm and soft, his black eyes as gentle as a queen of the night blooming amid darkness, easily shedding tears from sorrow or stimulation. Mo Xi had explored Goo Mangh's body as thoroughly as he'd explored his own mind. Engraved upon his memories was Goo Mahng in all his moods. The instant he saw the faint redness at the delicate outer corners of Goo Mahng's eyes, Morsi knew Goo Mahng had wept. For whom, or for what, was he crying? For the past he was helpless to change, or the future on which he had staked everything? The two men came to a stop at the foot of the mountain. The black-garbed man looked up at the sky.
It's late. If we stay longer, we'll be discovered.
Yes. Goo Mahng's voice was slightly hoarse. He performed an extremely formal obeisance toward the black-garbed man.
I've seen all that I should. Many thanks for tonight's accompaniment. Farewell. No need to thank me. You as well. Take care.
In a flash, the black-garbed man leapt up with Qinggong and vanished into the breaking light of day. Goo Mahng turned to take one last look at Warrior Soul Mountain, wreathed in mist. Then he tightened his black cloak around his shoulders as if it were hiding some precious secret. He lowered his head and strode away. Morsi had no need to hide after Goo Mahng left. He removed the concealment spells and walked up Warrior Soul Mountain alone to search for clues. He made for the restricted area. Since Goo Mahng had told him it seemed familiar, Morsi could believe he had most likely gone there. The restricted area on Warrior Soul Mountain was built with the strength of the imperial family, but it was simply a prototype at this point. It wouldn't be difficult to break the barrier. Morsi stood outside the deserted mountain area, his fingertips brushing the glowing light array. It was high level, but still no more than an ordinary blocking barrier, nowhere near as impenetrable as the one 8 years hence. But here in the mirror, as an uninvited guest no less, his spiritual energy and magical abilities had been greatly impaired. The array wasn't perfect, but he couldn't break it. The barrier glowed relentlessly in front of the Warrior Soul Mountain's restricted area, as if in mockery of this wandering soul who had come from the future.
Chonghua's current state is what it is. You cannot change anything with your power alone. General Goo, none of those who seek to blaze a new path have hands unsullied by blood. You know what the nobles of Chonghua are like. The pieces are already in place for your treason. This move cannot be taken back.
Who was the black-garbed man? His words were intended to remind Goo Mahng that Chonghua held bloodlines sacrosanct above all, to convince him to pledge allegiance to a new ruler. He sounded exactly like a Liao Kingdom agent trying to convince Goo Mahng to defect. But did Goo Mahng really collude with those from the Liao Kingdom so early? Morsi could think of one other possibility. The restricted area on Warrior Soul Mountain was built according to the imperial family's instruction. Perhaps some rebellious nobles saw something within it, realized what the emperor was planning, and developed treasonous intentions. So he brought Goo Mahng here to witness it for himself. All the better to cause him anguish and shatter his resolve, prompting him to make a clean break with Chonghua's nobility and blaze a dark path. But this line of reasoning also had its holes. Many factions jockeyed for power in Chonghua's imperial court, but which noble would truly want to see the system that honored bloodlines above all overturned? His heart was battered by one question after another. Morsi felt he was trapped in a dense and disorienting fog. He groped about within it, but had no way of capturing the truth. In the end, he couldn't uncover the secret on the opposite side of the barrier. The only thing he was sure of was that Goo Mahng's defection was far from the simple matter it seemed. By the time he returned to Shee Manor, Morsi still hadn't completely recovered. Shuang Qiu, holding a plate of tea and snacks, carefully approached.
My lord,
she said tentatively.
My lord, did you not sleep well last night?
Morsi didn't make a sound. He knew how unsightly and ridiculous he looked. He used to think that the ancient notes regarding the deadliness of the time mirror were preposterous, but he now realized they were no exaggeration. Goo Mahng had been completely hypnotized by the illusion, while Morsi couldn't escape the torment of the mirror even as a bystander who had been pulled into the past. Everyone had regrets in life, and all manner of secrets were concealed within the twists and turns of a lifetime. When faced with these regrets, wouldn't anyone who returned to the past want to try and mend it? When faced with these secrets, wouldn't anyone from the future be astonished? When someone traveled back in time within the mirror, They would realize that seas could rise or mountains could fall by the whims of a single word or misstep. Or they might end up like Morsi, learning that the reality he'd assumed true was but a shoddy facade that had fooled him for 8 long years. And yet the truth eluded him. Morsi felt as if his head were splitting. The pain was about to drive him mad.
My lord,
Zhanxing startled.
you...
He was gripping his teacup too hard. It shattered with a sudden squeeze of his fingers. Zhanxing screamed as blood ran from the cuts, streaming over the pale skin of his hand.
My lord,
She stammered.
I'll help you at once. Get out. My lord?
Morsi's dark eyes were so bloodshot, they looked to be veiled in red clouds. He stared at the blood trickling without pause from his hand and rasped.
Get out.
Zhanxing didn't dare talk back. She hastily tidied the plates and cups and scurried out. Morsi didn't wipe the blood from his hand, hoping the mild pain could help clear his head. He desperately needed to clear his head. There were 2 days until Loo John-shing's execution. He could still bear it. He wouldn't disrupt the past inside the time mirror over a momentary impulse. He hoped Muzhong Chuyi and the rest wouldn't defeat the Shangao and rescue them from the time mirror so quickly. The present had already buried this past he was in. He wanted to stay longer in this world of 8 years ago. Goo Mahng once said he would choose to burn brilliantly, even if the fire reduced him to ash. Morsi didn't have such a grandiose dream, but even if the agony should grind him to dust, he would choose to dig out the truth. Chapter 88. Execution. In a blink, 3 days passed inside the mirror. Morsi sat in a side room of a small lodge in the city outskirts, watching the water clock by the window in silence. In accordance with the emperor's demands, today he should have been on the road to the northern frontier, but he hadn't left. He raised a hand to look at his palm. It had a translucent sheen. And it wasn't only his palm, but everything in this world. Even the blades of grass were beginning to lose color. The time mirror was weakening. Muzhong Chuyi and the others were in the real world, where time flowed quickly. Perhaps Muzhong Chuyi or Jiang Yexue was merely performing one spell or reciting an incantation on the outside, while several days had passed in the mirror. If his current state was anything to go by, Morsi estimated that he and Goo Mahng would leave this world in another 2 or 3 days. Thus, he didn't care if the emperor discovered he hadn't left for the north. He just wanted to learn a few more secrets before the dream shattered. Another drop of water fell. The time on the water clock neared the hour of Wu, nearly noon. Morsi rose and walked up to the bronze mirror. He altered his features with a simple illusion spell, then pushed open the door to leave.
Huh, let's go. Hurry over to the Eastern Market to watch the beheading. Deputy General Lu's about to get his head chopped off. Who would have thought? Times really do change. His rash action killed so many people. If you ask me, not even death is enough to clear his sins.
The street bustled with raucous activity as people hurried toward the Eastern Market. Some of their faces showed anticipation, others elation. Some were sobbing, others terrified. Whatever emotions they experienced, the Eastern Market seemed to draw them all like popping hot blood buns fresh from the steamer, luring vultures that craned their necks toward the execution platform. Footnote 9. Buns steamed in human blood would be the hot blood buns. The concept originated from old superstitions that eating one could cure tuberculosis, or from Tang Dynasty doctor Chen Zhangqi's book Lost Writings of Herbs and Plants, which stated that people would go up to the executioner to buy buns dipped with blood of the executed to cure sickness. Returning to the reading. Morsi silently joined the flow of people and arrived before long at the gate of the Eastern Market. At its center were the officials carrying out the execution, as well as a crowd of spectators like soft dumpling skins, wrapping round and around the platform. Loo John-shing, in a spotless white prison uniform, sat barefoot and cross-legged on the platform. His expression was serene, without any of the panic of one about to die. The execution official brought him wine and meat. Loo John-shing grinned and thanked him with a laugh. He pulled a chicken leg from the plate and bared his pointy canines as he tore into his meal. Swiftly, he finished all the meat and started on the wine, gulping down the gallows brew of bravura. At last, he wiped his mouth on a sleeve.
Sir, your little wine pot is so dainty, so girlish. Can't you just bring me a jug?
The official looked at him strangely.
How are you still eating so happily? You're about to die.
Exactly. Loo John-shing bared his teeth, laughing as though his true form were a hungry wolf.
It's the last meal of my life. Did you want me to cry as I eat it?
The official glared at him, perhaps wondering how shameless a person must be to snicker like this after making the kind of trouble he had.
There's no jug of wine for you,
he said stiffly.
That's the whole last meal. No refills.
Loo John-shing sighed.
A shame. I could have set off drunk.
The official scoffed.
So you're not actually that calm. You're just looking for some liquid courage so you won't feel it when your head comes off. Not quite.
Loo John-shing clapped and smiled.
My head coming off will only make a wound the size of a bowl. This officer just wants to set off for the Yellow Springs drunk and borrow some courage from the wine to admire the beautiful scene on the banks of the Wangchuan River. Perhaps I'll even compose some poems that'll make me famous in the underworld.
Footnote number 10 for Wangchuan River. This is, in mythology, a river separating the Yellow Springs from the rest of the underworld. To cross it, souls must go over Naihe Bridge, which requires them to drink Mang Po's soup of forgetfulness. Returning to the reading. The executioner was rendered wholly speechless. At this moment, a clear voice called out from the bustle below the platform.
What poem do you want to write now? Is it two Oriles sing in the green willow, one's uglier than the other though? Or, I was born like this to have some means. Nights of pleasure aren't just dreams.
Footnote number 11. The first half of these couplets come from famous Tang Dynasty poems. The second halves are original. The poems are Four Quatrains, number 3, by Du Fu, and Qiang Jin Jiu by Li Bai, which is my favorite. Okay, anyway, returning to the reading. The crowd turned to see that Goo Mahng had appeared in their midst. He was wearing a pin-straight set of Chonghua's formal military robes. Though stripped of the tassels of rank, they still accentuated the length of his legs, the slimness of his waist, and the solemnity of his features. From two slender figures hung a loop of twine attached to the wine jug sealed with clay. Under the merciless noontime sun, he walked toward the execution platform.
Aha! It's General Goo! Pa! I misspoke. It's not General Goo. It's Goo Mahng. Goo Mahng.
The audience gathered for the execution slowly parted to make way for him. Countless pairs of eyes stared in open curiosity. Everyone knew of Loo John-shing and Goo Mahn's lifelong friendship. Everyone also knew Loo John-shing's mistake precipitated Goo Mahn's fall from the pinnacle of society to its very gutter, becoming a wastrel who spent his days lazing around a brothel. Now that these two were finally meeting again, how would they treat each other? Would Loo John-shing look ashamed before Goo Mahng? Would Goo Mahng spit on his former friend and curse him in rage? Few things were more exciting than the drama of jealous competition, antagonism between a wealthy man's wives, or brothers turning on each other. Absent the first two, the crowd at least hoped to see these brothers at each other's throats. The noisy execution platform gradually fell silent. It was too quiet. Hidden in the crowd, Morsi could almost hear the rhythm of his own pounding heartbeat. He sought Goo Mahng's silhouette, that tall and elegant figure clad in the old robes of Chonghua. Today, Goo Mahng didn't appear listless at all. He was like refined bamboo standing in a cool breeze, as if the past half-year's dissipation hadn't eroded his strength a bit. In this silence, Goo Mahng walked onto the platform alone. Once, he'd had multitudes at his beck and call and was never without an escort. But of those 100,000 comrades, only he remained. All the rest had been sacrificed or detained. There was nothing else he could bring. Just one man, one jug of wine, one set of military robes stripped of all honors. Their past glory like a fleeting dream, leaving behind a pitiable ruin. Loo John-shing tilted his head back to watch him approach. After a moment, he bared his teeth in a grin.
Mangar, you still remember the poems I wrote?
Goo Mahng glanced down, his thick lashes casting shadows under his eyes. He sat down with a jug of wine in his arms.
You slapped those lines on so poorly. I couldn't forget them even if I tried.
Loo John-shing chuckled, scratching his foot as he laughed.
I knew you'd come send me off today.
Goo Mahng snorted and removed the clay seal on the wine. He took a sip and pushed it at Loo John-shing.
Have some. Ah, the Soaring Swan's 15-year-old pear blossom white? What else?
These two didn't come to blows, nor did they argue. The spectators below weren't the only ones surprised. Even the execution official standing nearby was stunned, speechless. Although Loo John-shing had been sentenced to death, Goo Mahng hadn't yet defected. He'd been stripped of his rank, but his past merits remained. The official didn't want to openly make things difficult, nor did he dare to. He hesitated.
You see, the rules around the execution meal, we were brothers, you know. I'm here to send him off.
Goo Mahng looked up.
Sir, allow me this small mercy.
Regardless of all else, Goo Mahng was still Chonghua's beast of the altar, the ever-victorious god of war. Even at the peak of his influence, he had never been a bully or held grudges. Before those eyes, dark as black jade, the official quailed. He stepped aside with a sigh. As the sun climbed in the sky, the shadow cast by the sundial grew denser, darker than ink. Loo John-shing drank and laughed as he chatted with Goo Mahng. Perhaps because talk of hatred was futile on the brink of death, neither brought up the defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain. The hour of the execution drew closer and closer. The blazing sun burned with white heat, and the air was filled with the scent of death approaching. The spectators swallowed as they stared at the sundial, slowly growing anxious. Yet the ones most at ease were the man about to die and the friend here to see him off. At last, they finished the wine.
Do you have any last wishes?
Goo Mahng asked. Loo John-shing smiled.
Too many. Which of them can I help you with? Taste more pear blossom white for me,
said Loo John-shing.
I will. Look at more beautiful people and beautiful scenes for me. Okay.
Loo John-shing thought for a moment. Finally, he reached up to touch Goo Mahng's military uniform.
Mangar, don't wear these anymore, all right?
The charcoal in the fire pit crackled. Goo Mahng lowered his lashes, his expression dark and thoughtful. No one at the scene would understand what this expression meant, other than Morsi, who knew Goo Mahng had already decided to defect. Loo John-shing's final wish was for Goo Mahng to lay down his armor and return to a life of peace, away from the butchery of the battlefield. How could he know that Goo Mahng would indeed never wear the military robes of Chonghua again? Instead, he'd replace them with the black battle armor of the Liao Kingdom and step onto a blood-soaked path of no return. Goo Mahng paused, head low. His lashes seemed to quiver as he smiled faintly.
Okay. Never again.
Loo John-shing's eyes brightened, a smile stretching across his face.
You mean it? When have I ever lied to you?
Loo John-shing burst into laughter.
You've made pretty promises ever since you were little.
As he chuckled, the smile that had unfolded in his eyes like spring leaves faltered slightly.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Goo Mahng asked. Loo John-shing's gaze shone with tenderness, the first time Morsi had ever seen such a gentle look on his sharp and predatory features.
Mangar,
he said.
You should get married and settle down.
Goo Mahng stared.
You've always been a free spirit, but we've been brothers all these years. I know you've always wanted a place to call home.
There was a meaningful note in Loo John-shing's voice.
You're not getting any younger. If you're done having fun, you should rein it in, so I can...
Goo Mahng cut him off.
Uncle Loo, how old are you?
Loo John-shing widened his eyes and pursed his lips.
I'm saying this because I care. Why don't you know what's good for you?
He was about to say more when there came a sharp whistle. The cultivator standing at the corner of the high platform had begun to blow his yak-horn bugle, its clarion call piercing the skies.
The time has come,
the crier shouted. The time has come. The blinding sun had reached its zenith. Its white light streamed onto the confounded multitudes, onto the one about to leave and the one left behind, onto the dark massed spectators. This would be the end for these two brothers from childhood. Goo Mahng gazed calmly at Loo John-shing, so calm it was as if they were only a general and his soldiers splitting up for a battle strategy and would soon regroup.
I'm heading out,
Goo Mahng said. Loo John-shing smiled.
Think about what I said.
Goo Mahng cast him a long glance. After a pause, he said,
Okay, I will.
With that, he descended the high, narrow stairs of the execution platform, long robes brushing the ground. The execution official stepped forward, raising a copper mallet wrapped in red cloth to strike the gong. Its metallic tone was clear and carrying as the man cried,
The time has come. Prepare.
It wasn't like in the storybooks, where a mounted soldier would charge in shouting to spare the prisoner, an imperial edict held aloft as he spurred his horse through the crowd. Loo John-shing didn't put up a struggle. There was no sudden rescue. Hardly any escaped the jaws of death. Those who received the grace of fate were a scant few indeed. Loo John-shing and Goo Mahng looked at each other, one upon the platform and one below, both struck by the memory of what Loo John-shing had said when he enlisted years ago.
I don't want to die at all. I want to be an ancient geezer who takes a handful of wives and sires a bunch of kids. That's the good life for me.
Back then, Goo Mahng had laughed.
Now that you stepped onto the battlefield, your life's in danger every minute. How are you going to become an ancient geezer?
But Loo John-shing feared nothing. He stroked his chin, half joking and half serious.
You're right. Then I might as well think about what kind of death would suit me. What would? It would be better if I got stuck in a Liao Kingdom dreamscape, one filled with peerless beauties all chasing me for you-know-what.
At this, he waggled his eyebrows.
And, of course, I couldn't be so rude as to refuse, so I'd end up dying from a loss of essence.
Loo John-shing grinned lasciviously, kicking his feet.
What a way to go.
Back then, they were fearless. In their mouths, matters of life and death were no more than fodder for jokes.
Or beheaded by an incomparably gorgeous Liao Kingdom demoness,
Loo John-shing continued.
Hopefully, she first takes a fancy to me, and I'd rather die than submit, so she defiles me first, then kills me. Wow, how thrilling. Can't you come up with something normal?
Goo Mahng heckled.
Normal is boring.
Loo John-shing licked his lips and grinned.
Normal would be a horse-side burial, my brothers weeping around me, faces streaked with tears. It's a horrifying thought.
Who would have guessed that the worst death Loo John-shing could imagine for himself was far better than his destined end? As a soldier, his final rest was no horsehide burial, but a pointless death as a disgraced criminal on Chonghua's chopping block. No one cried for him. No one wept with their face streaked with tears. Of his imagined brothers, only Goo Mahng remained. The executioner stepped forward, raising the curve of that snow-bright blade high into the air. The wind ruffled Loo John-shing's bangs. He looked down at Goo Mahng standing below, the corner of his lips lifting in a smile of relief.
Down!
Farewell came as the word rang out. Life and death forever sundered. Chapter 89. That Year's Pain. Crimson blood splashed and the onlookers cried out. Amid gasps from the crowd, it slowly soaked into the grain of the high platform's wood. The noon sun was so bright as to be unnerving. Goo Mahng stood ramrod straight, his face devoid of emotion as he looked on, watching as the head fell and rolled, watching as the body collapsed. His best friend's body lay cleaved in two. Loo John-shing's head rolled forward, finally coming to rest at the edge of the platform. Open eyes stared at Goo Mahng, as if trying to say,
Mangar, turn back. It's all over. Let my death become the end of this dream. Don't go on. There's no way forward. Only the mirage of a castle in the sky. Turn around. Get up.
The executioner's blade dripped scarlet, warm blood running across the floor in rivulets.
Go home.
The execution official cried.
Execution complete.
After the initial excitement and awe had passed, the frozen crowd gradually thawed, like a sleeping beast waking from hibernation within a dark cave. Most wanted to look at Loo John-shing's broken corpse, but few dared. Some of the women gathered their courage and snuck a peek, only to immediately bury their eyes in their palms with a yelp, shuddering with fright at the mess of blood and flesh.
How terrible! Don't look, it's really scary. If you see it, you'll probably have nightmares tonight.
The crowd bustled, their focus gradually shifting to Goo Mahng. Some began to notice Goo Mahng's expression and started to whisper among themselves.
Why hasn't General Goo reacted at all? He really hasn't. He hasn't even paled. Does he really hate Loo John-shing? Loo John-shing did ruin him, after all. Why did he come to send him off then? Probably just to keep up appearances. People like to keep all their fights private. They're not going to air their grievances in public.
Goo Mahng hadn't defected yet. At this point, he was still an honored subject of the nation. Someone else immediately shot back.
Nonsense. General Goo isn't that kind of person. Deputy General Loo was an old friend. Even after making such an awful mistake, General Goo sent him off out of friendship. He's keeping calm for propriety's sake. After all he's done, what more do you want from him?
The other bystander wasn't to be outdone. They snorted disdainfully.
To share in life and death, in good and ill, that's what brotherhood is. If I were Goo Mahng, I would have broken Loo John-shing out ages ago or gone directly to His Imperial Majesty and begged him to exchange my own life for my brother's. I wouldn't have done what he did at all. How do you know General Goo didn't beg? Just look how indifferent he is. Goo Mahng only pretends to be a good person. He's cold-blooded and heartless.
Perhaps Goo Mahng had heard these words, or perhaps he hadn't. He was still staring at the execution platform. The executioner had left, and the execution official was directing the cleanup. Goo Mahng stood in the harsh noon sun, his back straight as pine and bamboo, elegant and upright without the slightest hint that he'd been struck by heartbreak. He watched unblinkingly as Loo John-shing's corpse was bound and his head strung high, watched as the bloodstains were washed away. The execution official unrolled an imperial edict of yellow silk and read in dispassionate tones.
Let it be known throughout the nation that the guilty subject, Loo John-shing, failed to control himself on the front lines, decapitating an envoy and causing the defeat at Phoenix Cry Mountain. Greatly disappointing. His Imperial Majesty's Heavenly Grace. After today's execution, his corpse will be exposed for 3 days.
The voice echoed through that cloudless sky. Everything had come to an end. The execution was over. Goo Mahng didn't stay long. Beneath those watchful eyes, carrying that jug of pear blossom white he shared with Loo John-shing, he turned and left without looking back. Of those 100,000 comrades, he alone remained. Goo Mahng returned to his own dwelling. Morsi, under the invisibility cloak, followed. This former first general of Chonghua was so poor he didn't even have his own manor. This was little wonder. Recruitment and weapons cost money. Provisions and equipment cost money. And making connections also cost money. His soldiers' pay was only so much, so after his slave collar was removed, he had rented a little house in a quiet area near the Eastern Market. This humble abode had a firewood hut and a single bedroom with 1 bed, 1 set of blankets, a desk and chair, and a couple of dilapidated wooden boxes. These were all the possessions this famous general had to his name. When Goo Mahng returned to his house, he set the jug of wine on the desk. He then went to the firewood hut. It was lunchtime, so he made a fire and boiled water to heat up the leftovers he kept in the muslin cabinets. He was eating. His last brother was dead. Everything he had was irrevocably lost. But he was eating. On the little wooden desk sat the red clay jug that Loo John-shing had drunk from before his death, a large bowl of white rice, and a dish of vegetables and tofu. Like a starving man, Goo Mahng shoveled food into his mouth, scraping his chopsticks against the bowl. The food vanished quickly. Not a single grain of rice remained. He rose once to refill his bowl and continued to eat. It was as if an endless void had opened in his heart, and he could only stave off the chilling emptiness by eating. He ate, head down, cheeks bulging. Eventually, he couldn't swallow as quickly as he shoved food into his mouth. He slowed down, but still choked. He tried his best to swallow that mouthful of rice in silence, as if trying to absorb some words he couldn't say, a pain he couldn't voice. He swallowed miserably, face upturned and eyes wide. Staring at the ceiling, he let out a sob. It was like a groan of indigestion, so comical was the sound. But the rims of his eyes were red. Morsi was right by his side, mere inches away, but he couldn't speak a word, nor touch so much as a strand of Goo Mangh's hair. He watched, helpless, as Goo Mangh's eyes filled with tears. Goo Mahng kept his head tilted back, as if he was trying to keep his tears from spilling. He swiped at his lashes and sniffed. He had stopped himself, or at least he thought he had stopped himself, so he lowered his head once more and picked up the chopsticks to return to that plain and flavorless white rice. The same rice he and Loo John-shing had used to eat with vegetables and tofu, back when they were smaller at Wangshu Manor. He attempted a few more bites, but the agony of loss was like the belated fall of a blade. It stabbed deep into his belly, finally thinning his breath and breaking down his flesh, shattering that falsely composed facade. His hand shook as he held the chopsticks, and his lips began to tremble as he scooped in rice. He tried to keep still through his shuddering, but to his dismay, tears started to squeeze their way out of his eyes. One after another, they streamed down his cheeks to drip on the desk. He moved his chopsticks in silence while wiping away his tears. His throat tasted bitter. All his sobs were trapped within, and he forced them down along with the rice. But the point came when his shaking hand could no longer pick up the tofu. He tried once. It slipped. He tried again, and it fell apart. This man, burdened with the weight of 70,000 souls, was broken by this tiny tableside defeat. Goo Mahng flung the chopsticks down. Rising to his feet, he swept everything off the desk with an almighty crash. Plates and cups smashed on the ground, and most completely shattered of all was the empty wine jug Goo Mahng had brought back with him. He panted, his chest rising and falling as he stared blankly at the mess. He had smashed that red clay jug into the broken splinters of an old dream. Goo Mahng stared and stared, eyes red and teary. He walked over and squatted in a daze, reaching out to try tidying it, but he retracted his hand before even touching the shards. He looked like someone waking from a dream, a kind of awakening that left him absolutely shattered. It was the first time Morsi had witnessed this kind of shattering in him. If Goo Mahng dared to show such a face in front of his comrades in the military, their admiration and trust in him would fall to pieces. He was no war god, but mere soft mud, a lonely and helpless ant, a scattered handful of sand. Goo Mahng sat weakly. He was wearing a neatly pressed and spotless military uniform, yet he seemed to have been stripped of all strength as he crumbled to the dirty floor. He stared, trembling, at the mess on the ground. A small whimper issued from his throat, like that of a lost wolf pup. The whimpers became sobs, struggling out of his mouth, one after another.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Morsi watched him, watched as he slowly curled in on himself on that ice-cold floor, hugging his knees as he tried to resist with all he could but failed to hold back the flood of tears. Watched as he desperately bit his own lips till his teeth were bloody, but couldn't keep those soft sounds from escaping his mouth. The deity had finally shattered. The god of war had been completely defeated. Goo Mangh's lips parted. He had bitten himself viciously. He was on the edge of madness. He panted, the rims of his eyes scarlet, his gaze despairing as he looked around the room, as if hoping someone would suddenly appear, whether god or ghost, to save or to slaughter him. Someone to save him. Someone to stay with him. It hurt. It hurt so much. How was the world so vast, yet it wouldn't hold on to 70,000 heroes? How was hell so deep, yet it wouldn't take him, a single living ghost? He was the only one left. Goo Mahng finally wailed aloud. He wept and clutched at himself desperately, as if trying to embrace his comrades, his brothers, through the barrier between life and death, as if his deceased friends had possessed him, martyred souls crossing the Yellow Springs to hold their General Goo. Sobs leaked from those bitten lips. In the end, his cries became breathless, his pain beyond reckoning.
I'm sorry,
Goo Mahng kept saying.
I'm sorry.
Morsi watched in agony. His heart had hurt as if cut up by a knife since he watched Goo Mahng desperately try to eat as he shed silent tears. Goo Mahng's pain felt like his own pain. Goo Mahng's helplessness felt like his own helplessness. Only now did he see with his own eyes how much it hurt Goo Mahng to lose Loo John-shing, so much that he felt his whole heart being wrung dry by blood. He watched Goo Mahng's face carefully. Goo Mahng was almost delirious. He looked as if he could see ghosts, or as if he wanted to see ghosts. He looked around the small house in despair. He wanted someone to be with him. Even if they wanted his life, even if they blamed him, he hoped for someone to come to him. A knife was twisting in Morsi's heart. When Goo Mahng had voiced his grievances in the palace hall, Morsi wasn't by his side. When Goo Mahng's pain grew deeper, still he wasn't by his side. And now, despite knowing that nothing could change within the mirror, despite knowing that impulsive action was dangerous, Morsi's anguish, like Goo Mahng's, was too much to endure. Before Goo Mahng had defected, he was the one who had failed Goo Mahng. He was the one who didn't accompany Goo Mahng, didn't see the cares weighing on Goo Mahng's heart. He was the one who treated Goo Mahng like an invincible god, forgetting that beneath the war armor lay a mortal's body made of flesh and blood, a mortal body still struggling despite its wounds. A person's heart was not stubborn stone and cold steel. The silent sufferance of 8 years collapsed like an anthill. Morsi couldn't bear it anymore. He lifted the invisibility spell on his cloak. Brows drawn low, he knelt by Goo Mahng, who had curled into a ball.
Goo Mahng,
He choked out.
look at me. I'm still here.
I'm still here. But perhaps Goo Mahng was too heartbroken, or his mind had been strained to its limits and finally collapsed. He didn't react at all to Morsi's voice, nor his sudden appearance. Morsi was in such pain that he couldn't speak. His hands, too, were shaking. He reached out, wanting to take hold of his beloved, clad in military uniform, stripped of that fathomless glory, and gather him into his arms. In this moment, he stopped caring for consequences. Really, over the 8 years of pain and longing, and the upstream flow of the time mirror, he'd finally lost his mind.
Goo Mahng, Goo Mahng.
Morsi whispered, unintelligibly hoarse.
It's okay. I'll stay with you. I'll stay with you.
He reached out to take him into his arms, hugging Goo Mahng from behind. But where his shoulder would have touched Goo Mahng's back, a faint light flashed. Morsi found he had passed right through Goo Mahng's body. He looked at his own hand in shock. His face paled, his expression slowly transforming into one of panic. They were out of time. Muzhong Chuyi and Jiang Yeshue's spell to break the mirror must have reached its final phrases. He didn't know how much longer he could stay in the mirror's world. At this moment, he had already become insubstantial. He couldn't interact with this world. He couldn't show himself. He couldn't comfort Goo Mahng, nor could he turn Goo Mahng from his path. That day, Goo Mahng huddled amid the broken crockery, hugging his own knees as day turned to night. When darkness fell, he leaned against the icy wall, like a beast separated from its pack. He slept curled in a tight ball. His eyes were yet red, his nose was red, and even his ears hidden in his inky hair were flushed a pitiful red. Morsi sat by his side all night. Even asleep, Goo Mahng whimpered with unconscious sobs. Morsi raised his hand, but he couldn't wipe away a single one of these tears that had been shed 8 years since. This was the nature of time. There was nothing he could change. Even within the illusion, the two of them had still ended up like this. Chapter 90. Last Mission. Loo John-shing's corpse was left in the sun for 3 days. Over their course, Morsi's surroundings within the mirror gradually lost their color, and people's voices became so indistinct they seemed to be speaking from across an ocean. Morsi no longer needed the invisibility cloak to walk around freely, but he had already run out of time. It was impossible for him to talk to anyone from 8 years ago or draw out any more buried truths. He sank into passive waiting. In these 3 days, Goo Mahng didn't go out, nor did anyone come to visit him. Loo John-shing had been Goo Mangg's closest friend, as well as the deputy general of the Rou Bao army. Many had believed Loo John-shing would earn reprieve, that the emperor would pardon him at the last minute. But the emperor took neither Goo Mangg's feelings nor reputation into account, and Loo John-shing was beheaded. Anyone could see the writing on the wall. Goo Mahng had truly fallen from grace. He'd never again recover his former standing. It was the end of the Goo army. No one would commiserate with someone downfallen and discarded. No hoofbeats stopped outside the door of the former general. For company, he had only Morsi, who had come to him across 8 years of time, but whom Goo Mahng could not see. Goo Mahng stayed in his house, lying dazed in his bed, only eating if he had to, only moving if forced to, as if time had come to a standstill. But Morsi knew that time flowed ruthlessly on. Morsi would look at his own hands from time to time. When he spread his fingers, they were almost transparent. He suspected just a few shirchun remained until they'd leave the world of the mirror. He didn't even know if it would hold until the evening.
General Goo.
A knock, and someone calling from the doorway. Goo Mahng opened his eyes and stared blankly before stumbling to his feet. He hadn't eaten or stood up in too long. He was dizzy and tripped as soon as his feet touched the ground. Morsi instinctively reached out to help him, but he couldn't. Goo Mahng crumpled pathetically to the floor. He hastily clambered to his feet. The door opened. A herald from the palace stood outside.
His Imperial Majesty commands you to present yourself in the throne room.
Goo Mahng seemed exhausted.
Did something happen?
The herald paused.
This official isn't sure either. General Goo just needs to go.
Morsi understood. The emperor was about to give Goo Mahng his final assignment. He prayed he could stay a little longer in the mirror, that he wouldn't be torn away in this last moment. He wanted badly to learn of this assignment Goo Mahng received before he defected. After sending the official away, Goo Mahng walked to the dull bronze mirror. He changed into a set of clean, coarse robes and splashed his face with water. Droplets streamed down his cheeks, washing away the exhaustion writ there. But they couldn't wash away the redness of his bloodshot eyes. In a bid to make himself look more alert, Goo Mahng pulled his hair into a high ponytail. He moved out of habit to fasten the hair crown that represented his military rank, but his fingers closed around empty air. He stopped being a general long ago. Goo Mahng stood silent for a time, then fumbled for a silk ribbon to secure his hair. The ribbon was white as a lotus root, as if he were mourning someone in secret rebellion. He entered the palace. When the Imperial Guards saw him, the red feathers on their helmets rustled as they moved to perform obeisance, then quickly realized that they oughtn't and straightened their heads. In the deep and forbidden recesses of the palace, the Emperor's heavenly power lay solemn over the halls. The Imperial Guards couldn't openly gawk at Goo Mahng, but there wasn't a soul among them who didn't watch covertly for the moment he appeared at the end of the long corridor until he vanished into the depths of the palace. Over the years, Goo Mahng had walked this corridor countless times, his rank constantly rising, his admirers constantly growing. Now he was a commoner once again, attired in blue clothes and cloth shoes, with no one by his side. For half his life he had spent all his passion, exhausted all of his sincerity. He'd weathered so many tribulations only to return to square one, not so different from the first time he entered the palace as a slave. He approached the majestic throne on the high dais. Court wasn't in session, and 3 pale yellow veils hung in front of the throne, hiding everything behind from view. The sovereign's appearance was not so easily glimpsed. Goo Mahng paused. He didn't lift his gaze. He kept his lashes lowered, his head bowed. He knelt, then kowtowed.
The commoner Goo Mahng greets your Imperial Majesty.
The throne room was still. No one came. Goo Mahng was silent for a while, then raised his head and kowtowed once more.
The commoner Goo Mahng greets your Imperial Majesty.
This time, a response came, but not from the throne. A voice floated over from behind Goo Mahng, light as smoke.
You bastard Goo, so you do know you're a commoner now. Why would His Imperial Majesty want to see you?
Morsi and Goo Mahng both turned to see Mu Zhonglian, wearing a malevolent smirk as he stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and his hands tucked in his sleeves. 8 years ago, Mu Zhonglian hadn't yet used ephemera. He was in visibly better condition, not yet so weary and weak. He wore a noble's robes, blue with gold trim. Though he looked, as ever, the picture of a rich and spoiled scion, his shoulders were straight, and he stood upright on his long legs. It was a far cry from the indolence he'd later display, looking as if he'd fall over wherever he went. Goo Mahng stood up.
Why is it you? Why shouldn't it be?
Mu Zhonglian scoffed.
General Goo is so forgetful. You spent so many years serving in my manor, giving me massages and fawning over me in every possible way. What's changed? You've forgotten your roots after a few years as a general?
Goo Mahng made no reply.
Besides, you're a commoner now, and I'm still nobility. To receive a message from me on His Imperial Majesty's behalf is already an honor for someone like you.
Mu Zhonglian's sharp chin tilted up, mockery showing on his fair face.
Why don't you kneel to accept the edict?
Goo Mahng was silent for a time, but in the end, he lowered his gaze and knelt to the ground, the hem of his light blue robes brushing the floor. Morsi had long grown used to the armored General Goo Mahng, saw now how thin and weak his unarmored body was. The wide collar of his robe exposed a bare neck that looked so defeated a gentle pinch might snap it entirely. Mu Zhonglian spread his glittering gold-trimmed sleeves with a loud snap and produced the Emperor's order.
As heaven wills and the Emperor commands,
he said in languid tones.
The casualties at the Battle of Phoenix Cry Mountain were a result of Commander Goo Mahng's misjudgment. Deputy General Loo John-shing showed lack of discipline before the troops and beheaded the envoy from Rou Li, dooming our soldiers and souring Chonghua's relations with this nation. The guilty subject has been beheaded and the corpse displayed to the public. The former General Goo is charged to take the head and personally present it to Rou Li in apology. End of edict.
When this scroll had been read, Goo Mahng wasn't the only one stunned. Morsi stared as well. The Emperor meant for Goo Mahng to personally take Loo John-shing's head, leave for Rou Li, and apologize for the offense of Loo John-shing killing their country's envoy. As the sound in the time mirror grew fainter, Morsi felt the ringing in his ears grew louder. The Emperor wanted Goo Mahng to personally go to the neighboring country and offer them Loo John-shing's head. He clearly didn't care at all for Goo Mahng's feelings, didn't care whether Goo Mahng fell apart or defected. He truly was testing Goo Mahng's limits, heedless of the price of pushing this man away. Mu Zhonglian narrowed his sultry eyes.
Does General Goo not accept the edict?
Morsi shook his head.
No, don't accept it. Don't.
But judging from Goo Mahng's expression, he seemed to have long recognized the Emperor's cruelty. After the first moment of shock, Goo Mahng's features turned cold and indifferent. He became calm, revealing only an undisguised weariness.
Don't accept it. The commoner Goo Mahng,
those low words issued from Goo Mahng's mouth,
accepts the edict.
He raised trembling hands to take the scroll from Mu Zhonglian. An endless fall, a foregone conclusion. And so it was that, in the late autumn of that year, many people came into new fates. Chonghua's only slave army met a terrible end after past glory, while Loo John-shing was executed at the Eastern Market, his corpse strung up for 3 days. To humiliate the once unyielding Goo Mahng, the Emperor ordered him to personally bring Loo John-shing's head to Rou Li as a formal apology for the disrespect of killing their envoy. Goo Mahng set off carrying his brother's head on his back. Dusk should have come with a lustrous splendor, but in Morsi's eyes, it was so pale as to be transparent. The power of the time mirror thinned, and the world within began to overlap the world without. From time to time, Mo Xi could hear chanting, Jiang Yeshue's voice reciting the incantation.
Cross toward the abyss of suffering, chase no more the past. Wake thou from these fleeting dreams, return, return.
As Mo Xi listened in his daze, Jiang Yeshue's voice faded. Only the sounds of the mirror would remain. Goo Mahng, prepared for a long journey, adjusted the cloth sack on his back. He arrived at the entrance to Chonghua's Eastern Market and looked for a stall selling meat pies.
Boss lady, could you get me 5?
The pastry seller was a pretty married woman. When Goo Mahng had visited her stall in the past, she would shout and laugh, her voice carrying, eager to ensure everyone knew General Goo ate their meat pies. But today, when she lifted her cheerful face from the stove, her smile froze. Goo Mahng thought he hadn't been clear and repeated,
5 pastries, the same kind as always.
The woman instantly flushed. On one hand, she was eager to break off all connection with this man. It might prove troublesome even to take him as a customer. On the other hand, she found herself ashamed, her conscience at odds with her self-interest. Torn, she stood frozen until her husband came over.
Nope, nope, we're closing up shop.
Goo Mahng was startled, eyes widening.
But the night market has just opened. Nope.
The man snapped brusquely. Goo Mahng understood. He looked at the woman for a moment. Her face was scarlet with shame. Her conscience seemed to have suffered a shattering blow, the blood from the breakage rushing to her face and dyeing it red. He remembered the first time he came here to buy pastries. She had been single, a delicate maiden who grew so flustered at the sight of him that she'd stammered with it. Her cheeks had been rosy as a sunset then, as they were now. Unfortunately, as time passed, many things changed. The maiden was now a madam, and the reason for her blush was likewise different. Goo Mahng sighed.
Never mind. I just wanted to buy some for the road. Your stall's pastries are really similar to the ones I've had on the northern frontier. They're both delicious. Thank you for letting me taste them all these years.
He turned to leave. The lady thought she might die of embarrassment. As she watched his retreating silhouette, she couldn't help shouting,
General Goo!
Her husband turned pale with fright and immediately clapped a hand over her mouth.
What are you doing? Do you want to get yourself killed?
The lady trembled. After one shout, she had lost all her righteous courage. She looked down, too afraid to make another sound. Goo Mahng's steps paused for a moment before continuing into the bustling crowd. When she raised her head again, eyes teary, he'd already disappeared. Mo Xi followed at Goo Mahng's side, watching as he walked. Goo Mahng seemed to have wanted to take some snacks from the capital with him. He hovered longingly in front of the little stall that sold Chonghua paper cutouts, but he was too conspicuous. The longer he stayed in the Eastern Market, the more people stared. The stall-keepers who were eagerly trying to attract customers lowered their heads and averted their eyes in silence when he walked by, wishing they could disappear together with their stall. Goo Mahng was an understanding person. He didn't blame them. These simple stall-keepers were guarding their livelihoods. If they served him today, they'd have it hard in the future. He had once lived in the lowest stratum of society, so he understood how it hurt to be disdained, to be left starving. When he looked at these little shops all avoiding him, his eyes held no blame. He just hadn't expected it would be so difficult to buy some mementos from his homeland on the eve of his departure. In the end, Goo Mahng left the bustling Eastern Market empty-handed. As he walked, he sighed.
Sorry, Zhanxing. I won't be able to buy that pear blossom white for you for a while. I can't drink it for you.
Of course, the head in his knapsack couldn't respond. Goo Mahng adjusted his burden again and walked on. He quickly passed the guards and left the city gates behind. He made his way to an old bridge carved of white jade stone known as Chonghua Bridge, which spanned the wide river that protected the city. One end connected to the road he had taken out of the city, the other to a path winding through wild grassland to the roadside departure pavilion and the capital outskirts. At the end of the bridge was a disheveled old man, about 70 years of age. His legs were ruined, and a swarm of flies and mosquitoes picked at him. Goo Mahng knew this person. He always sat here, leaning crookedly against the bridge, begging for money or food from the people flowing in and out of the city. The beggar was old, and he never moved from his spot. The city guards had driven him away countless times, but he would always roll his rheumy eyes, propping his arms on the ground and cursing them as he crawled away. After a couple days, he would crawl right back like a stubborn, bone-deep infection, lurking about here to beg. Goo Mahng had once asked around as to why this old fellow insisted on staying at the city gates and never left Chonghua Bridge. An aging cultivator had told him that this old fellow was once a soldier. When his entire troop was wiped out on the battlefield, he'd fled in cowardice and survived, but the geezer's conscience wore him down. After a time, he could bear it no longer and went to confess his crime to the late emperor. The emperor had been taken by benevolent governance at the time and refused to have him executed. Instead, he stripped him of his rank, shattered his spiritual core, and left him as a commoner. The man tried drowning his sorrows in wine and tried becoming a monk, but nothing could absolve him of his guilt. It gnawed at him with each passing day, until his mind slowly broke. The young cultivator became an old cultivator, and the old cultivator became a madman. Every day he'd recall the moment he left his comrades behind and fled. The memory drove him insane. In his madness, he hacked away at his own legs, thinking this would change the past and prevent his former self from running. But it was useless. The old lunatic's state only worsened. He was almost 80, and for so many years he did nothing but wait by Chonghua Bridge, day in and day out. He waited on the road that the army would take to return, his rheumy eyes forever gazing at the distant horizon. No one knew what he was waiting for. Until the day Goo Mahng returned victorious as a commander for the first time, armor shining beneath his scarlet cape as he rode astride a Pegasus with golden wings, weaving through myriad troops and trampling the billowing dust. That dirty old man at Chonghua Bridge suddenly seemed livelier than Goo Mahng had ever seen him. He dragged his broken limbs to sit upright, straining to wave to them as his eyes overflowed with hot tears.
"You're back. You're finally back. Who's that old man talking about?"
One of the soldiers asked, baffled. Goo Mahng looked to his left and his right, but it was just him, and his comrades and brothers in the dust behind him. He thought it over briefly and realized with a jolt whom the old man had been waiting for. He had been waiting for those brothers he once abandoned to pass through the decades and return to the city in blazing colors astride their prancing horses. All these years, he had been waiting. Goo Mahng had dismounted and walked over to him. The old man looked up at the young general, the sun blinding his dulled eyes. Then he burst out sobbing, crying as he kowtowed to Goo Mahng and crawling forward to try to hug him. Loo John-shing had clicked his tongue.
"Mangar, that's dirty."
"It doesn't matter," Goo Mahng replied, stroking that old man's head. Everyone had their moments of weakness. Everyone made mistakes. This deserter had spent most of his life suffering for his split-second decision. It was enough, Goo Mahng thought. The old man wept hysterically, missing teeth showing in his open mouth. First, he called Goo Mahng Xiao Jiao, then Xiao Chen, and Xiao Donggua. Goo Mahng answered to all of them. After that, the old man seemed to have found peace. He was still mad, but he stopped staring so fixedly at the horizon. He acted more like a proper beggar. He would smile at passers-by, offering his dirty, broken bowl and singing his folk songs. Goo Mahng tightened his hold on the bag holding Loo John-shing's head and walked to the end of the bridge. Today might be the last time he passed by this old beggar.
"Uncle?"
The beggar's catch was good today. In his broken bowl lay a great big steam bun, and a pastry was tucked into his lapels. Though Goo Mahng himself had been the one to lift the weight on the old man's heart with his victorious return all those years ago, the man had forgotten Goo Mahng completely. He was elderly, after all, and had been tormented by his obsession for so long. He didn't remember which general it had been who dismounted to forgive him back then, to act as his Xiao Jiao, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Donggua. He looked up, chuckling mindlessly and watching Goo Mahng with languid eyes.
Sir, spare some change?
Goo Mahng lowered his head to look at the stinking beggar. After a time, he smiled too.
Now you're the only one who will talk to me.
So saying, he emptied all his valuables and calories from his tiankun pouch and handed them to the old man.
I'm off,
said Goo Mahng. He stood to leave, but the old man grabbed his wrist.
What is it?
The beggar seemed to have come to some realization, or perhaps he hadn't realized anything at all. He reached up to take that dirty pastry from his robes and held it out as if presenting a treasure, the wrinkles on his face overflowing with his smile.
Here. For me?
Perhaps, in his advanced age, the old man had some sensibility others lacked. He determinedly shoved the pastry into Goo Mangh's hands.
Take it. You and your brother. Eat it on the road. Eat it on the road.
Goo Mahng was stunned. Perhaps the eyes of the elder and children really could see ghosts, as well as the future. He looked into that wrinkled face, so deeply creased it resembled a walnut. After a moment, Goo Mahng slowly arranged his face into a smile and accepted that meat pie of his homeland from the old beggar's hand.
Thank you. I can take a memento home with me after all.
The old man nodded vaguely at him, his lips quivering.
You two must come back. Must come back.
Goo Mahng's smile froze, but it didn't fall. Lashes fluttering, he rose to leave.
Goodbye.
Adjusting the cloth parcel on his back, he turned to take one final look at the city gate with its towering eaves. The word Chonghua was emblazoned there in solemn seal script. In the setting sun, it gleamed splendidly. Goo Mahng looked for a long time and mumbled, as if to himself, or as if to someone else. He said once more,
Goodbye.
Goodbye. The last soldiers of the Wang Ba army were imprisoned by the emperor, and what remained of Loo John-shing's corpse was in Goo Mangh's knapsack. No one had come to see him off. He turned a lonesome figure stepping onto Chonghua Bridge. The river flowed beneath it like yesterday's glory, vanishing into dust. The old man beside the bridge suddenly called out, his voice clangorous. He craned his neck to watch Goo Mahng disappear into the twilit horizon. Hoarsely, while smashing that beaten bowl of his, he began to sing a verse of the folk song he knew best.
Time is swift as the shuttle does fly, yet before it I think two paths lie. In bygone days was I envy of all, careless years past and careless thrall. Alas, today is my purse light, each hour, minute a year-long bright. I, too, once rode a splendid horse, my flag bid thousand on their course. One cry dispersed the demon crowd, godlike, before my feet all bowed. Today none mark my glories past. Men all called friends all turned their backs. By day I starve, by nights lack sleep. Street side I sing here for my keep. Too high a flight, too far a fall. I blame not heaven nor kin foretall. But knowing now my bitter end, I rue the demons I once called friends. And now that naught can change my state, I beg you all to avoid my fate.
I, too, once rode a splendid horse, my flag bid thousands upon their course. I, too, once wore dark armor and bore a jade token amid arrows that shot to the sky. And now? Morsi gazed at Goo Mangh's retreating silhouette without blinking. Even a blink would mean one less glimpse of him. So he watched Goo Mahng leave with his eyes wide open, tears streaming down his cheeks. He had always known it caused Goo Mahng pain to defect, but knowing it in his heart and seeing it with his eyes were not the same. The sight of it burrowed through his heart and his bones, seeking to shatter his soul. Why did he end up like this? Why did he have to end up like this? This man, who had once been a youth in blazing colors astride a spirited horse, was now like a delirious beggar, a wild and wandering ghost, as he walked down that ancient road into the distance. Morsi knew this departure marked a 5-year-long farewell to Chonghua. When he returned, it would be with 2 souls missing, a mind broken, and a body covered in bloody filth. A chasm that could no longer be bridged. When he returned, regardless of what known or unknown webs had been spun 8 years ago, all the mistakes would be set in stone. Neither Morsi nor Goo Mahng could change anything that happened. Goo Mahng. Morsi felt his heart impaled by sharp awls. He wanted to follow, but Jiang Yueshue's singing grew ever clearer, and the colors within the time mirror became ever more indistinct. Goo Mahng's silhouette seemed so insubstantial it might disappear at any moment. Morsi yearned to cross the sea and cliffs of time to take that lonely figure into his arms, to wade through oceans of blood and redeem that man who would never again turn back. But as the release incantation neared its end, Morsi lost the ability to move. He would leave this world behind at any second. He could only look on as that tiny, lonely figure, with no one to accompany him, set off alone. Morsi's organs felt like they were being ripped apart. He wanted to tell Jiang Yueshue to wait a little longer, to stop chanting. Wait a little longer. Give him one last moment. Let him accompany Goo Mahng to the end of this path, or at least let him stay a few more seconds. Cross o'er the abyss of suffering. Chase no more the past. Let him keep him company just a bit longer, bearing neither hatred nor grudges, even if for only a moment. Wake thou from these fleeting dreams. Return, return. Stop chanting. Rackled by the agonizing pain of farewell, Morsi watched as Goo Mahng was swallowed by the horizon's light. An endless darkness fell. His heart convulsed and struggled. It twitched, beating so relentlessly, so fast. The pain came for his mind and sought to destroy it. He almost didn't want to return to the present. To return would hurt more. He would have to face the shattered remains of the man Goo Mahng had been. He would have to contend with a world in disorder. How could he face Goo Mahng? How could he look upon the emperor? How could he ignore the sins Goo Mahng had committed or suppress the heartbreak he felt for him? The time mirror was not but a fleeting dream, drowning so many within its depths. The descriptions the past academy elders had left were not wrong. In the throes of this stabbing pain, Morsi struggled to breathe as a ruthless force yanked him viciously forward. Countless colorful and twisted reflections flashed before him. The smile at the corner of Goo Mahng's eyes, the anger in Goo Mahng's gaze, that two radiant youth from their time at the academy, that traitorous general who vowed never to turn back aboard a ship at the Battle of Dongting Lake. The happiness, the anger, the sorrow, and the joy they had shared over half their lives all rushed into his head, only to splinter in the setting sun over Chonghua Bridge. Shihajun! He heard Jiang Yueshue's voice. Morsi tumbled onto the icy floor of Bat Tower, his eyes wide, unfocused, his chest heaving. He couldn't catch his breath. He was like a fish dragged ashore. The pain of waking up to find himself thrust again into a position of helpless passivity strove to tear him asunder. As he lay panting on the ground, he saw Jiang Yueshue come over amid the chaos to kneel beside him. Goo Mahng. Morsi was almost sobbing. Goo Mahng, don't go. Don't go any farther. Jiang Yueshue grabbed his wrist and checked his pulse. Morsi was on the verge of death. The agony was such that his heart had all but stopped. A heart-rending pain, a bone-breaking pain, stripping flesh from his bones. His heart seemed to be wailing in despair, as if crying out that it really didn't know how to face love and sin. Might as well just kill him. Might as well just let itself stop beating. It hurt too much. To look on helplessly as his most important person walked into hell. No, was forced into hell, tempted into hell. And this time, just as before, he could neither redeem him nor accompany him. Just as before, he never discovered the true reason Goo Mahng turned traitor. Shihajun! Jiang Yueshue called to him anxiously. Morsi! Morsi! Don't go. It's a dead end. At this moment, a beam of golden light spilled from the time mirror. Goo Mahng had also been freed. He was thrown out, skidding to a stop on the floor of the demon tower. Morsi dragged himself onward. The time mirror had nearly worn his body to the breaking point. Goo Mahng! He crawled, stumbling and falling toward that figure who had crumpled to the ground. He reached for Goo Mahng's hand, the hand he hadn't taken 8 years ago, neither in reality nor in the mirror. Goo Mahng! His fingertips were shaking badly. Just as they were about to touch Goo Mahng, the man on the ground twitched. Morsi's fingers curled back as he unconsciously withdrew. Goo Mahng slowly sat up. Silence reigned. Goo Mahng closed his eyes, his brows knitting and lashes fluttering, then slowly opened them once more. His face was pale, his lips bloodless. He turned to look at Morsi, and for a long while remained silent. His gaze went from confused to clear, from broken to focused. All the color and emotions he had lost returned to his face like ink spreading on paper. Little by little, they traced out his countenance and character. A familiar face emerged as Morsi watched. As confusion gave way to awareness, it was as if he saw a long-dormant queen of the night flower bud finally stretch its petals and bloom. Goo Mahng was no longer that vacant and ignorant shell, no longer a shackled slave who couldn't distinguish past from present. His eyes remained that tempered blue, but the blank expression on his face gradually shifted to one that was calm, strong, and untamed, clear and unyielding. There was no need for any explanation, no need for a single word. All it took was a glance for Morsi to recognize that this was certainly not the Goo Mahng whose mind had been shattered. Rather, the man who had returned from the time mirror was Goo Mahng with all his past memories. Chonghua's beast of the altar, the former General Goo Shixiong. Y'all. My God. Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about this. So, it's always so hard to start doing my notes from right where I just left off, going back to the top. I know in the past there were many times where I just like went in reverse, but I don't know why I try to just like go in order, because everything just makes sense that way when I do it. But so I guess we have to go back to the meeting with Loo John-shing and him basically thinking that it's better to have destroyed Goo Mahng's hopes and dreams because he believed them to be foolish. And he just he thought that Goo Mahng's hopes and dreams would have no would not come to fruition, that he wouldn't make an impact because they were slave boys. So like, what could they do? But it was Goo Mahng's dream to pioneer something like this. And it's so upsetting that Loo John-shing was so caught up in his desires for Goo Mahng, or his thoughts for Goo Mahng, that he didn't focus on what Goo Mahng actually wanted. Because being a pioneer of something doesn't necessarily mean that you are the one who brings something to full fruition, but it means that you are the starting point. You are the one that sparks the change to happen. And that's what Goo Mahng wanted. And you took that from him. Even if he didn't make the biggest change, he was making a step. He was setting the foundation for those after him to do it. And so to know that Loo John-shing didn't even understand that, even though they were best friends, it really hurt. And of course, he had no right to take that opportunity away from Goo Mahng. We don't know what would have happened for Goo Mahng. The reason why Goo Mahng had never suffered defeat was because Goo Mahng was great at what he did. He wouldn't have suffered defeat if you didn't intentionally do what you did. Everything probably would have went according to plan. And so it's just really sad when we think about Goo Mahng and him turning traitor and just his hardened heart and everything. It's no wonder. Not only was he, raised to believe that he's nothing, he eventually got something, but even when he got to be General Goo, as we learned, there were still people talking about him, still people looking down upon him and just thinking, oh, he's going to turn into another Hua An, we'll see. And then when he loses everything, it's like you even your best friend didn't believe in you. And it's just, don't get me wrong, I don't think that Goo Mahng knew this, but it's just like, even like the energy of that or the spirit of that, it's no wonder that Goo Mahng just felt so defeated and had no hopes or belief in anyone, you know? And so I hurt for Goo Mahng so much. I also hurt for Morsi to have to see this, but at the same time, it's important for him to see this because all this time, he's really just been so angry at Goo Mahng and like, oh, was I not important enough for you to not defect and you stabbed me and blah, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, he has absolute right to have those feelings, but it's like he wasn't really fully considering Goo Mahng and why he did what he did and the pain. I'll say he didn't consider the pain. He did consider the why because, you know, he understood why Goo Mahng turned traitor. But I don't think he considered the full picture of what Goo Mahng experienced. You know, it doesn't make anything that he did right, but to consider it, to understand it, you know, he finally was able to do that while jumping into, well, he didn't jump into the time mirror. He latched himself onto Goo Mahng to get into the time mirror. Anyway, so now, you know, being in the time mirror, just seeing how awful the emperor was, the way he talked about Goo Mahng, of course, before was awful. And I don't know. Y'all. I'm gonna just go to my next note. So we have this black cloaked man who has the voice distortion thing on, who took Goo Mahng to the Warrior Soul Mountain to the Forbidden Area, and we need to know who he is. I'm glad that Mosi didn't act on his impulse because, you know, he was able to see everything play out. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, dang, I wish he would have played on his impulse. But it is what it is, I suppose. There's nothing to be done about that. So now, going to the next thing, despite what happened with Loo John-shing and the decisions he made, I want to speak specifically from Goo Mahng's perspective and just like him going there to be with Loo John-shing in his last moments, even after what he did, was just really honorable, number one. But I think it also really shows that he's like, hey, my friend committed a wrong, but like I'm still here for him, which we saw him act the same way with the old beggar guy. That's just the kind of heart he has. He has a compassionate and very forgiving heart, clearly. But for him to like be there and stand expressionless, I know that had to be so hard to hold himself together like that. And then for him to go home and just, you know, stuff himself to try to keep things at bay, and then just it all spilled over. And he finally was able to like cry and mourn Loo John-shing. It was just like such a hurtful moment because it's like, you know, we're surrounded by all these other people with their thoughts on why he looks the way he looks or doesn't look the way he looks, and you know, just making their own conjectures about Goo Mahng and having to keep a straight face then, and then finally breaking down at home, and then there's like no one there for him. It's just so sad. And oh my God. And it just made it more worse because Morsi was there and he was like waiting and waiting. He was like, I'm not going to reveal myself. I'm not going to reveal myself. And then finally he couldn't take it anymore and he wanted to comfort Goo Mahng, and then he couldn't. He couldn't. And a part of me is like, if he wouldn't have waited, would he have been able to hold him for like just a second, you know, or a couple of minutes before he started fading? I don't know. But it was just like a really painful thing for both of them, honestly. Like, I felt so sad that Morsi couldn't be there for Goo Mahng like he wanted to, because he wasn't there for him in the past. And even if it wasn't real, he wanted to be there for him in the time mirror, but he didn't get that opportunity. And I felt awful. And the emperor is just like the cruelest person ever to have the edict made, and Mudong Lian give him the edict to take his best friend's head to this Jolie envoy and apologize. How much crueler can you get? You know, I'm just like, you kidding me right now? Are you freaking kidding me? Yes, the emperor was definitely tempting him, pushing him to defect. And it's like, I get it now. Even Because you have to think, like Morsi had his questions like, was I not enough to make you not defect? When you are pushed to the brink of insanity, essentially, just broken down so much, we can do things that aren't fathomable. And yes, no amount of your love and care is going to change the hurt and the pain that someone is feeling when they're drowning in their sorrow. Not to mention that there was even a time in the regular past, not in the time mirror, but in the regular past, where Morsi, it clearly, from the way that it was worded, he clearly avoided Goo Mahng because he didn't want to see him in the state that he was in. You weren't there for Goo Mahng when he needed you. Even if nothing would have changed, like, you weren't there, and I'm glad that in this chapter 90, that he said, he let Goo Mahng down, that he wasn't there for him when he needed, because that is absolutely true. But anyway, where was I going with that? Fuck, I don't know where I was going. I'm just gonna go to my next note then. 1 second. Okay, yeah, so I don't know, it's just like, Morsi finally was able to admit to himself that he let Goo Mahng down, that he wasn't there for him when he should have been / could have been, because I know he was, sent away. But in the times before that, he was just like, oh, Goo Mahng will get over it and everything, because he was putting him on a pedestal, and he really didn't even see Goo Mahng in that time period. And so it was nice to see him actually acknowledge that. Then on page 265, as we approach the end of the chapter, I had highlighted, the part where Morsi is like, how could he face Goo Mahng? How could he look upon the emperor? How could he ignore the sins Goo Mahng had committed or suppress the heartbreak he felt for him? And I feel that just so many feelings, so many contradictory thoughts and feelings going on. And it makes perfect sense because he can't erase the hurt that he felt from the events that actually happened. But he also can't erase the feelings he now feels that he has filled in some of the gaps. It's possible to feel two contradictory things at once. It's possible to love and hate someone all at once. This is possible. And so I'm glad that Meatbun put that in there, because that is just like a clear reflection of the human heart when it is tormented and not knowing what thing to do, you know? So now I guess the next 3 chapters we'll be reading together in the live session. And really the question is, now that Goo Mahng is back, General Goo is back, that Goo Shishong is back, what is his personality going to be like? Because clearly, as Morsi already said, just from looking at him, he was able to see that he's not Wolf Gaga anymore. He's General Goo. So that is what we'll be digging into when we read together. Chapters, I think, 91 through 93. How many pages is that? Let me just see. Page 268 to 298. Okay, so that we'll be reading about 30 pages together, minus maybe a picture or blank page or whatever. And then after that, I'll read the remaining chapters in my own time and publish that video on Monday. But yeah, we flew we flew through volume 3, I guess. Just in case anyone says anything, because I know y'all be so caring for me based on like comments from the past, from when I was going through health issues, like a whole lot and everything. I just want you guys to know that no, I'm not like forcing myself or pushing myself to read these chapters. It's helping me. I can't just sit, I can, but I can't just sit around and like cry about the loss of my grandpa. Like, I need to do things to keep me busy. And then when I have my moments of pause, I can think about him and cry or do whatever I need to. But like, I'm still working. I'm still reading. I haven't painted anything, but I'm still painting. These are the things that make me happy, and I'm not going to stop doing them. So I just want to put that out there before I get comments like, don't push yourself. You don't have to do it for us. I really appreciate it, but it's not necessary. So anyway, yeah, we're almost done with this. We are almost halfway through. Poof. Jesus. Okay, that's all. 我爱你们.